Commission. The hour is 5:30. Day and time is Monday, February the 21st, 2022. Welcome. Glad to have you. I would like to make sure that everyone that is in attendance, please sign your name on the sheet in the back. Secondly, there is a seat up front if anybody standing would like to have that. Jenny, do we have access to any additional chairs? Should we, or are we limited by that? Seating downstairs. Okay. So I now call this meeting to order, and I ask the clerk to have roll call. Please, ma'am.
Commissioner Terry?
Yes.
Mayor Paris?
Present.
Commissioner Holland?
Yes.
Commissioner Atkins?
So before we begin, I want to explain how our procedure will work concerning these two proposed zone changes. We do have a sign-up sheet for everyone interested in speaking. Now, is there anyone else who has not had the opportunity yet to sign up? Please do so. And as we decided at our last City Commission meeting, tonight's meeting and the first reading of the ordinance is scheduled, as for what our attorney has advised us, is an quote-unquote argument-style proceedings.
Mayor, may I interrupt you? The sign-up sheet is by the door for anyone looking. You have it now? Okay.
What that means is that members of the public are allowed to state their position and opinions, but any facts or evidence which they wish this body, the City Commission, to consider must be ones already presented to the Planning Commission. For example, if you wish to explain to the Commission why you believe this proposed zone change is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, we will be glad to hear that. However, it would be impermissible, thank you, it would be impermissible for a speaker to produce new photographs or data or expert reports or similar items that was not previously submitted to the Planning Commission or in the record. Hope everybody understands the rules of procedure tonight, and if someone's comments appear to cross that line of submitting new evidence, I will ask our attorney, Mr. Bowman, to assist us in navigating that issue. Thank you for joining us, sir, all the way from Lexington. We appreciate it. Yes, sir. In reviewing the list, we have a total of 7 people signed up. Now, I know there's more in this room, but I'm going to consider that to be the only people that desire to speak at all. Since Mr. Sharp is the applicant for the zone change, we will give him time to articulate his proposal first. I also understand that Ms. Ann Claire Compton has a prepared presentation and that she has been designated to speak on behalf of the Colonial Heights subdivision as an objector to this proposed zone change. We will ask each of you to present to make your presentation uninterrupted. After you have concluded your remarks, members of this commission may ask their questions or may not. The commission reserves the right to question each of you after your initial presentations or questioning is finished. So first, Mr. Sharp will go, and we may ask questions at the end of your presentation. Ms. Compton will go, we may ask questions at the end of your presentation, and after that, if there's still questions on behalf of the commission, they are free to ask those to either of you. Now, Ms. Compton, to correct, you're doing your presentation, so you're making a presentation on behalf of a number of other persons who have signed up to speak. Is that correct?
Well, not exactly. We are represented as a group, but the person presenting tonight will be David Mullins.
Will be, I'm sorry, who?
David Mullins.
Mr. Mullins, would you raise your hand, please? Hi, sir. Okay. Based upon this information, I'm going to rule that Mr. Sharp will have 15 minutes to make your presentation, and Mr. Mullins, same 15 minutes. After that, Any other member of the public may speak for no more than 3 minutes. And I want to reiterate that while you are allowed to speak in the interest of time, I would encourage you to not merely echo the comments of earlier speakers. One additional note, based upon the advice that we have received from legal counsel, given the facts that we have on both sides of this issue, we will not be taking any preliminary vote tonight. We will allow the commissioners to thoroughly review the record and contemplate that evidence and the arguments that we've heard here tonight. Is that clear? Excellent. With that said, we're going to move right on into the first reading of ordinance number 1989. This is with respect to Ridgeview Road and Heartland zone change. The way this works, I'll ask the city clerk to read the ordinance. There'll be a motion for the ordinance, a second for the ordinance that will allow us to have your presentations and any questions. There will be no vote, so if there is no further, let me back up a minute. Mr. Bowman, we don't have to make a motion or second, do we?
You don't, if you, yeah.
Yep.
You'll be fine not to
Scratch-
have the motion in a second.
Scratch what I just said.
You can just have the
Okay.
reading and then,
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
This is the first reading of ordinance number 1989, an ordinance changing the zone from R1A Single Family Residential to R1C Single Family Residential for approximately 32.484 acres, more or less, of real property located at 0 Ridgeview Road and 0 Heartland Drive in the city of Danville, Kentucky.
Thank you, ma'am. As I indicated, Mr. Sharp, you're up first, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I look around, sort of feel like Daniel. Daniel in the lion's den.
Welcome,
thought,
welcome to
well,
our world.
I looked at it and I thought, well, perhaps I could be devoured by a lion. But then on the other hand, I could very well have suffered Daniel's experience in the furnace. So I will either be devoured by fire or devoured by a lion. You know, I just have to sit here and be sacrificial. So thank you for the opportunity to be before you. I need, for my clarification, from the attorney. The planning and zoning meeting held on the 26th of January of this year was the exclusive and sole body to hear and take evidence. Is that correct?
yeah, and I think that's what the mayor's laid out. for the
I want it on the
rules for
record
tonight.
that I've asked.
It's been said multiple times this week and last week.
Okay, now, I need clarification as to what you mean by argument stop. I understood that with the taking of evidence, that at that hearing, it was closed. And having been closed, I didn't realize argumentation became another form of presenting evidence. So if you don't mind, I'd appreciate that clarification.
Sure, I'll clarify that for you, because it may be helpful for everybody in the room as well to hear that, and for the mayor and the commissioners. So you have pieces of evidence that were submitted to the Planning Commission and were part of the record below based on what was submitted ahead of time in your application, and then based on testimony that was received and other items that were presented that evening to the Planning Commission. So I think what you're allowed to say is you're allowed to explain to the City Commission, or folks who speak after you are allowed to explain to the City Commission why you believe that your application and the facts that were given to the Planning Commission support a zone change, that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and those. And then the people who come before you and speak are allowed to say, based on your application, based on the evidence that was submitted to the planning commission, why it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Clarify this point for me, if you don't mind. We're here to approve, deny, or state that another meeting, this goes back to planning and zoning, and that another meeting must be held. Is that not true?
That is true. Those are the options before
Does
this
this argument
commission.
style support that?
Absolutely.
Okay,
You're here to advocate your cause before this body.
all right, appreciate that. And now, let me proceed. Thank you so much for that. To begin with, I'll share with you some background about this project. This was not an endeavor that I had looked forward or that I had even planned to undertake. The Housing Task Force Committee in Economic Development and its chairman has asked me to come forward and see if I could not offer some solutions to what is termed the housing crisis here. And Marty Gibson, the chairman of that committee, or that task force, invited me to his office. He recruited me to offer suggestions. Not only did Marty ask me, but the county judge, Judge Hunt, broached that topic with me also. And so in looking at this initially, I did not want to be involved. But I stated I would be. And so I've looked at what is out here and what is available. And my assessment is that there are lot shortages in Danville and Boyle County. That's my assessment. And that anytime that you have lot shortages, you have housing shortages. Therefore, we have a housing issue. And response to the question that was posed to me, my immediate answer is that Danville needs cost-effective lots. Lots that are less than $35,000. My solution in looking at it was that we need greater densities in our developments. By having greater densities, that enables us to reduce the lot cost. The lot cost is one of the significant costs in building a home. And presently, the lots in Danville are on the market between $30,000 to $40,000, if not more. Reducing the densities can keep the lot values in the upper portions of the $20,000 range. So that's why I'm involved. I did not take it upon me to come here to be brutalized. It's what I did not take. I just offered an assessment and a solution. I'm in a position to be able to help in our community's needs, is what I am. So let me proceed to give you some background on my property. This property was zoned R1A back in 1971, not 2071, because none of you will be around, neither will I. Anyhow, at any given point in time, I can present a preliminary plat to the zoning commission and proceed and request it being accepted. Now, in accordance with the master street plan, which I don't control, this body controls it, the city commission, I'm required to connect Ridgeview with Heartland Drive. It is part of the master street plan. Now, traffic study is not required. However, the city has the prerogative of saying we would like to have one, and that could become a condition of a preliminary plat or final plat that I would submit on this property. And I would have no option but to do it, and that's not a problem either. Now, another regulation that one needs to keep in mind is from planning and zoning is that adjacent properties with identical zoning are not required to have buffers. That's a P&Z reg. And another point I want to make is that restrictions on property rest with the developer, not the community or the adjacent landowners. I create the restrictions for that property, no one else. That is the background of that. Now, we go into my request for amending the zoning map to permit R1A to R1C. This I endeavor to do with one restriction. That is, this would be a single-family development. And P&Z on the 26th of January approved my request for that amendment. Here is the corpus of that document submitted to this body for action. Number one, this amendment is consistent with zoning ordinance standards and meets the state statutory requirements. This amendment is in agreement with future land use plan. It complies with a comprehensive plan for low-density housing. This is an infill project, a noted preference within the comprehensive plan. The price point of these homes were between $200,000 to $300,000, and could be higher or could be lower. There's no assurance. And that there is recognition on the part of the Planning and Zoning Board or Commission that there is a slight and acceptable modification to the existing zone and use. However, this proposal conforms to and is compatible with the surrounding area, that being single-family residential homes. The conditions that were added at that hearing consist of, one, my request that it be a single-family residential development. Second, that there be no modular home construction on this property. And that there would be a preliminary traffic study or a traffic study at the time of my preliminary plan. All of those were the conditions that were attached to the document that you received. What I find interesting, somewhat perplexing, is why I have the opposition I have. I'm not requesting a radical zone change. I am a radical zone change that consists of a dirt bike track, or consist of a dollar store, or consist of a multifamily unit. R1C permits that. I did not include that. That's restricted away from it. Or I think it does. I could be mistaken. I'm not an attorney. Anyhow, continue with this. Colonial Heights is permitted presently in the low-density zoning, 5 lots per acre. The zoning request I am making is 5 lots per acre. No more, no less. Now, there have been several critical comments made about this property, and as I understand it, the airwaves have been properly warmed, and so has the email lines been fully worked. But most, I think, reflect the fear of the unknown, and I doubt that many think that they will be seriously impaired. However, some of the comments paint a picture, and a picture that I think everyone in this community needs to be aware of. One, comment that lot sizes are not equal to or greater than their lots. Secondly, connecting Ridgeview to Heartland creates a traffic hazard. Solution to that, very quickly, is on Winning Covers, a 3-way stop sign. On one of the streets in Colonial Heights, Betsy Ross, a 3-way stop sign. 3-way stop signs are most effective in slowing down traffic.
Mr. Sharp,
Yes.
hate to interrupt, but you've got about 10 seconds. How much longer will you need, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry. Then I have a lot more, but well, then I'll go to my summary.
I'm going to ask Mr. Mullins a question. Do you grant him time for to further his presentation? It would. That's correct. That's correct. Mr. Sharp? We'd like to hear what he has to say. Continue on, please, sir.
Thank you. Another comment was that, I don't want to look out my back door and see small homes. Another, my $300,000 home is going to be devalued by those little homes in Candlewood. Another, a children's psychosocial well-being will be affected negatively by looking at their neighbors' big homes, big yards, and big pools. In that line of thinking, the socioeconomic standing in Candlewood is below the Colonial Heights social standing. And then the comment has made, and this is the one that bothers me immensely, is that smaller homes and folks who own those smaller homes will expose the Colonial Heights neighborhood to greater criminal activity. This bothers me, and it should. It should bother everyone in this room to have made statements like that. However, they have been made. I do not think that at the time that they were made because they were excited and that they haven't given a great deal of thought to it. It's my thoughts with that. And that none of these comments whatsoever have addressed the compatibility of the amendment with the comprehensive plan, and in that respect should not be considered as a part of this process. and then I will proceed with what the position of this commission. A vote yes on it means that this commission endorses the economic development idea of providing affordable housing. Second, this proposed development directly achieves the stated goal and objectives of the comprehensive plan of providing affordable housing for all income levels. In addition, it's a priority established by EDP. This proposal achieves the stated goal of infill development in our city, which takes advantage of readily available utilities and planned growth. It endorses homeownership as a means of achieving equity for all without regard to income, without regard to color, and without regard to religion or gender. And that one that you'll find interesting is that this project approximates a $24 to $36 million project. And revenue will be lost on that. Now, a no vote on this denies homeownership, perpetuating socioeconomic inequality. It casts doubts about future projects within the community. And it means that this land plus other acreage will remain vacant, and no effort will be made to go forward. Now, in summary, the point of today's meeting is for the city to either approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission or deny it. In order to deny it, you must decide that the findings of the Planning Commission are unfounded, inaccurate, or incomplete, and base your decision on new findings. However, as my application is directly in accordance with the future land use map and the comp plan, and my opponents have not presented any information proving noncompliance with the comp plan, there's no rational basis for its denial. Furthermore, the time designed for the public comment by law is at the public hearing of the Planning Commission, which is the place where the conditions are provided. Adding conditions at this level is inappropriate and unproductive, since I have already presented the conditions. P&Z has added the conditions, and that condition is achieving the same density of housing afforded to Colonial Heights in the acreage. None of the criticism of my opponents that my opponents have voiced has anything to do with compatibility with the comprehensive plan. And I ask you to approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission as presented without further delay. Thank you for the opportunity and the patience with me.
Is there any questions at this time that you would have of Mr. Sharp? Anyone?
Yeah, he quoted that there were not any cost affordable, I think it's you stated comments about cost affordable lots, that there were not any available in our community that were less than 35.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You early on, you talked about cost affordable housing. You mentioned the price about $35,000 per lot. And my question is do you have any data about the number of lots in our community that are less than $35,000? Or do you have any data about a number of lots that cost more than $35,000?
in response to your question, I'd say there are scattered lots that can be purchased in this community for the construction of a home. And now, some of the lots are not necessarily the best lots for the construction of a home. They are ones that require significant amount of money to bring them up to standard for a home.
Bring the lot up to standard. That means you're talking about,
That means that you're going to have to spend a considerable amount of money in order to be able to place the foundation on that home, or in order to provide backfill on that property, or in order to be able to put a drive that accesses the garage or the basement.
okay. Thank you.
Kind of a question for you or P and Z. I watched the hearing. How many planning commissioners were missing? Seemed like a lot, but.
There were actually 7 planning commissioners present that day. One had to recuse themselves because they live in the neighborhood and did not participate in this particular hearing, so there were 6 present that day. So there were 3 technically absent.
Okay, 6 out of 10. Right.
6 out of 9 because one had a conflict.
Okay,
There were 6 there, which gives us a quorum to take action.
okay, thanks.
And I guess the other question I had was about the traffic study. That, you know, would increase the number of lots being proposed. The preliminary traffic study is not required, not due at this time.
If you listen to when I presented my first portion, I stated that I had the ability, under the present conditions, to go forward without a traffic study. However, I did not state that the city of Danville could not request one. They can request and require that I have a traffic study. That's,
I would love to, okay?
Yes, the requirement in the, I guess, the zoning ordinance, that describes the zoning ordinance and comp plan that describes when we get a traffic study. It says on zone changes where it has some requirements about how large of a project requires it, but it's at the discretion of the city engineers, what the zoning ordinance says, so when we looked at this project, you know, they're increasing the number of residential lots by 30 is what they're proposing. So it didn't meet.
From what number to what number?
From 90 to 120, somewhere in that range, Jody? That was what the
plus or minus there. Those are adequate figures, but they're not assured. However, because when we get into the design process, we're not going to have any idea what we are going to encounter. Therefore, there could be less than the number of 120, 121.
Could be less than 90 as well, though, right?
What?
Could it also be less than 90?
You need to take your mask off so I can hear you.
Oh, I'll use my teacher voice. My question was, could it be less than 90 lots? I'm sorry. I can't work without my mask on, though, but could it be less than 20 lots if you go in and find circumstances that might require you to have less than 90?
The 20 lot, here is just an economic analysis that you need to be aware of.
Yes.
The additional lots make this project. Without these lots, there will be no project. Because the risk involved is not worth going forward. With this risk, I'm willing to bear. And that enables me to address a need for this community. And that is my sole motive for being here. And this commission has been on record for saying that we need housing. As a matter of fact, I think the mayor said you know, maybe we ought to invite an outside developer and builder in to provide this housing. I am up here saying, I will provide the lots, I will provide the housing. I am attempting to arrive at a workable economic figure. And if that's not achieved, then we'll let that property lie fallow. And there won't be any development in that area.
Mr. Sharp, let me ask a question. Did I understand you correctly that you were planning on doing a traffic study, or did I get that wrong?
No, as a condition to this planning and zoning, as a condition, it was attached that there would be a traffic study at the time of the preliminary plat. There was no need to attempt to provide an additional study in advance because engineers, two of them in here, will tell you that they can create models that will support and substantiate what the developer wants to do.
Yeah, I think, and we kind of talked about this at the meeting last week with the traffic study discussion that, you know, traffic study is going to tell you what you need to do to the existing street network to make this zone, that it could take the capacity of this zone change. And that's not really the concern a little bit with the surrounding neighborhoods is not whether we have the capacity to handle the traffic. We will have the capacity. I mean, that's any traffic study is going to show that the road network that we have will handle it. What our concern is that the traffic, there'll be too much traffic going one direction or the other, the speeds of that traffic, there's a lot of concerns about safety. And that's why we want to do a traffic study because we want to know, I mean, I'm curious myself to see what the numbers, how they pan out of what, just from a number standpoint, what direction are people going? There's been concerns expressed about, will people cut through all the way from Lexington Road, Lexington Avenue, all the way to Bergen Road through this section?
Yeah.
We'll include that in the traffic study to see if that's going to happen.
Could
And then
the-
we can
could
make
the-
tweaks to the road network to kind of address some of those issues.
Could the traffic study address another concern that I've heard from lots of people? Is there any other possible connectors from this development to North Third Street?
Yeah, that's in the comp plan. There's a connection shown out there. So that was one of the things we'll look at when they bring in the preliminary plat is we'll require a stub street be
We have
directed to the
entertained
west.
excuse
Yeah,
me,
go ahead.
We've entertained the thought of a sub-street connecting to the property to the, let's see, the orientation, to the west of it, because that is vacant. And we have given thought to that, or looked at it in advance in order to attempt to satisfy that need.
Yeah. And that's what if the properties along Bergen Road to the west are ever developed, we would require them to tie into that stub street and to provide another outlet to the neighborhood. So, that's something we'll include that in the traffic study. And, if we do have certain directions that we're seeing a heavy flow of traffic, and just from an engineering standpoint, what are our speeds? We can kind of include a little bit of a speed study in that traffic study process and see if we can do things to mitigate, do some traffic calming, those kind of
So,
exercises.
Mr. Morgan, how would you mitigate speed if it's an issue?
Well, I mean, there's simple things like Jody mentioned earlier of putting stop signs in at some of these intersections.
Three-way stop
It keeps people from using that as a cut through and trying to make time by speeding. We can look at other things. I mean, we can venture into the realm of speed humps and those kind of things. We can put in, we'd have to look at that. I mean, it would depend on the direction traffic's going, depend on the speeds we want to achieve. I mean, are we trying to keep people down to 15 miles an hour? Or are we trying to keep them to 25? There's some pretty extreme things we can do. But I think we would look at that with their engineer and talk through the different ideas that we come up with. I mean, there's a whole list of things we could do.
Who makes that decision?
That would be part of the plat process. We'd sign off on it. And some of the changes would need to be made outside of the scope of this 30 acres. If we needed to make changes along Ridgeview, we may have to go all the way to Bergen Road.
Josh, may I add to what you're saying?
Sure.
This becomes a collaborative effort between the developer, myself, and the engineering department. This is not something that he decides exclusively or that I decide exclusively. It's collaboration.
So I think the biggest concern is the timing on the traffic study. Does it happen before any development happens? And then the other question I have is, does that traffic study help to determine how many lots are going to be made?
Look at it like this, and I'm listening to that and trying to say it more simply, more succinctly. The zone change going from 90 lots plus or minus to 120 lots plus or minus, in and of the zone change itself is not something that would typically warrant a traffic study. However, the design, where you're focused on design speeds and things like that, which is why Josh is referring to the plat stage, which is why in this case, he deferred to that step to incorporate the traffic study, because the impact of the development warrants a concern for those details, right? So what he's suggesting is he wants to learn, he doesn't want to learn the capacity or the intersection capacity at Bergen Road because he intuitively understands that that's sufficient. However, it's going through a subdivision that we want to make sure that we mitigate any speed impact, or if there's balancing that he can do, then maybe he tries that. So what his recommendation was to planning and zoning was that, yes, we do want to require a zone change. It's just not necessarily necessary at the zone change step. It's necessary at the plat step. And that's, and requires, I'm sorry.
It would have to be, you know, when we're looking at the number of lots that a street can handle, I mean, those streets are, you know, they're built to handle a tremendous amount of traffic. I mean, there's, and just speaking from like an engineering standpoint, to reach a point where they're going to say, oh, a 20-foot wide, because they're looking at a technical standpoint. You know, when they're doing a traffic study, it's very technical. It's not, hey, you know, our kids playing in the street. I'd just be frank about when an engineer's doing a traffic study, that's not what they're thinking about. They're looking at, all right, it's a 20-foot wide street, it has curb and gutter, it has this many access points. I mean, it's very technical. So I mean, you'd have to reach a capacity, you have to reach a daily traffic number far beyond anything that we're going to create here, where they're going to say, oh, well, those streets aren't big enough, you need to widen them to 4-lane. You know, we're so far away from that. That's what they're looking at. They're looking at capacity data.
So look at it like this, Josh, too. Explain it like this. If you have a 16-foot wide street with no curb and gutters, with no clear zone, where there's utility poles adjacent to the asphalt, then in that case, you would want to require a zone change. I've done that twice, didn't I? Require a traffic study prior to the zone change being confirmed, probably, or as a condition of your zone change, because you know that there's structural problems with the infrastructure to support the growth. That's not necessarily what the argument is, but we do want to acknowledge that because we are aware that it's passing through an existing neighborhood, then the recommendation is, okay, we need to make that safer, we need to address that. This style of traffic impact study is what he's looking for then. I'm trying to clean that up a little bit, just so it's more, I guess, easier to delineate between the two. So it's not that you won't get any information from traffic study A, it's just that won't benefit you in this case. You're looking for the information in a different style impact review, if that makes sense.
Any other questions for Mr. Sharp?
So just to clarify, is it already a requirement to have the traffic study at the preliminary plat stage?
Yes, we'll have a traffic study done and in
Period.
hand before
It
they
is
ever break
required.
ground on a
Okay.
street. So,
And when you stated tie into Bergen Road, did you mean Shakertown Road or 33?
yes, it changes from
Okay.
Shakertown to Bergen somewhere in there.
Same, okay.
Yeah.
That's good to clarify, okay. And the connection between Colonial Heights and Candlewood, is that a have to?
I mean, it's in the comp plan. I mean, that's what we reference when we look at these things, is in the comp plan. Any traffic study we do is going to say, yes, it's a have to. because it divides the traffic. You know, it sends half of it one way, half the other, which if we're looking at traffic capacity and things, it's a positive. So, I mean, we're just following with the comp plan. The community created the comp plan. Now, you know, as we go through this process, there's differing opinions. We can have those discussions, but I think, you know, my engineering view of it is that it's a positive for traffic. I mean, it's a positive for many things. It's positive public safety, access, walkability. There's all kinds of things. But we also have to look at it from the community standpoint. Is this what the community wants here?
Right.
And that's why I think we've talked about comp plan in the future. We need to look more thoroughly at that road network plan because that's what we have to lean on right now. You know, with staff, that's what we have to look at. So we need to think more thoroughly about those connections when we draw that map up in the future.
Right, because it says proposed, and if a proposed turns into absolute all the time, that's really a big deal. Especially when you're connecting different neighborhoods and so many homes. So I didn't know if it was a absolute from what I read in the comp plan last night or not.
So look at it like this, you can, you know, to fully debate both sides of that. Right now, you have Ridgeview Road that is a dead-end road. So you have a significant number of homes there with just one entrance and one exit. And this does provide connectivity to the back so that that existing development also has two entrances and exits. And the reason why that is acknowledged in the comp plan as being beneficial is because it does improve public safety access. It provides a backdoor for public services to access the development to improve service, right? So there's opportunities on both sides of that coin, and I don't want to diminish that part of it either, right? Like, we need to acknowledge that.
Right. And that's important for safety, but Colonial Heights isn't huge. And I know, looking at Lexington, they do have cul-de-sacs. And if the new development, you know, went towards Shakertown Road, it would have 2, if not 3 exits still, and, you know, could provide a different, you know, barrier kind of between neighborhoods. So I just thought that might be a nice compromise if that was an option, to do a cul-de-sac and a separate entrance. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm not in a compromising mood.
Oh, yeah.
They're down there, right?
Exactly what do you mean, sir? I'm kidding.
You know,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
levity, I think, expressed it.
Well, I think that we need to go on and move from Mr. Sharp and get to the
That's fine.
folks from Colonial
Any other
Heights.
questions?
I got a couple more, but I'm gonna wait and see how these folks respond to him,
That's fine.
okay?
Mr. Sharp, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Uh-huh. I'm sorry? Are we allowed to ask a question? Don't believe. I think your presentation may raise a thought in their mind. Yeah. Mr. Mullins, you have approximately 21 and a half minutes, sir.
No, 15, don't change it.
You did a good
We're
job.
scheduling a special session, and I'll apologize. I'm not an attorney by any shape or form. I'm an engineer, so I talk in numbers mostly. That's what means meaningful to me. I'm also going to tell you right off that based on what your initial comments, there's probably some things that you're going to consider, could be considered new evidence, so you'll just have to tell me when I start discussing that. Go on or skip to the next slide, because I don't know what the definition is of new evidence.
You got that, Mr. Bowman?
So if you'll just yell out, "Shut up," or something like that. Okay, and I made this presentation with the help of all my neighbors. It's definitely not all my input. I'm speaking on behalf of several neighbors. I am doing the speaking, but feel free to stop me at any point if you want to ask a question during the presentation. I'll be glad to stop. So at first, we wanted to present essentially 5 bullet points that we think supports our statement about our proposing against the proposed zoning change. First of all, is that the homes in the newly developed area are not consistent with the homes in Colonial Heights or in Candlewood. We live in a deed-restricted neighborhood, and we are definitely not considered affordable living in Colonial Heights or Candlewood. From our research, there doesn't seem to be a real need in Danville or Bull County for this type of development. We're very concerned about the impact to our property values, and we've already talked a lot about traffic study. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the numbers involved with traffic study. And then some things that are really curious to us, especially somebody like me that's an engineer, is how strange this whole process seems to me and some of the things that seem to be irregularities in the process. First of all, starting with the lack of consistency or compatibility in the comprehensive plan review, Danville-Boyle County Zoning Commission change report from January 26. The goal one, as stated, was to respect the character of the existing neighborhoods by encouraging new development and development that will conform to the existing context, and so on. I won't go read all of it, but what that means to me is that the properties next to my house are going to look something like my house, or the property next to my house is going to look a little bit like the property next to my house. I don't feel that this goal is being met. My neighbors don't feel it's being met as well. I won't talk about the numbers a whole lot because I know that you guys are already familiar with what the difference is between an R1A and an R1C lot, but I threw the numbers up here. For me, it was much more useful to see what that looks like in terms of actually modeling up what an R1A property looks like and what an R1C property looks like. And if you notice, it's quite a dramatic change to go from an R1A property to an R1C. And these are showing the minimum size as required by the comprehensive plan. But to me, it's quite a striking change to go from R1A to R1C. As you are aware, on September 26, 2020, the council voted to approve this same zone change for the rest of Winning Colors. And I have a box that's showing where that property is. This is the rest of Winning Colors, and it should be noted that the existing properties that were already on Winning Colors are remaining as R1A. So in order to understand what this looked like, we looked at a little bit about what properties are being built now on Winning Colors, since this was the same arguments and for that zone change as well as by the same developer. So in order to look at how this really affects us and our neighbors, we modeled up what an R1C property looks like compared to what we have in our Colonial Heights. And what you're looking at here on the left-hand side is the properties that are being developed that meet the R1C requirements. They're 400 square foot with a garage. This is a picture of the houses that are being built right now on Winning Colors in that R1C zone change. And what you're seeing on the right is a typical home in Betsy Ross. It's not the largest, it's not the smallest, the lot's not the biggest or the largest, but this is a 3,300 square foot home, including the garage, on a lot that is much larger than what is required by R1A. When you put these side by side, it's a very striking difference what's going to be built in what could be built in the rest of this development or this new development compared to what's already being existing in Colonial Heights. To more frankly or to more clearly show you what that looks like, what I did is I took the R1C property, which you're going to see are these red boxes, and I overlaid them on top of that same property. And essentially what this means is that you can get 4 properties in the same space as a single lot in Colonial Heights. And it's really hard for me or my neighbors to understand how the goal of this new development and redevelopment will conform to the existing context when my neighbors, I can put 4 properties in the same space where my property exists. And I'll be honest, I have one of the largest lots in Colonial Heights. So for me, I could maybe get 5 of these in my lot. But again, I'm using the typical example. The recommendation passed by P&Z stated the change conforms and is compatible with the surrounding area, and it represents only a slight modification to the existing zoning and use. And I don't, based on this map, based on that map, I don't think that statement is clearly true. So with compatibility, first of all, it cannot be understated, if you've ever driven through Colonial Heights, what a diverse neighborhood this is. There are no 2 lots that are the same size or the same shape. There's no 2 houses that are the same size or shape. We're a deed-restricted community where the minimum size of our home is required. Inside that minimum size, you can have the freedom to build any style, any shape, as long as you stay inside the goals of R1A. This diversity of style and shape and size has led to a neighborhood that is rich with charm. And it just seems implausible that you can maintain that charm if your only goal is to stuff as many 1,200 square foot properties into 32 acres. It would seem like this is just honestly, it seems like a money grab to me. Placing this development side by side with Colonial Heights, there will be a clear marker when you're driving through the neighborhood. You're going to know when you have left Colonial Heights and you have entered this new development. It will not be a gradual change. It will not be consistent from one neighborhood to the other. You're going to hit the top of Ridgeview and you're going to say, "Holy cow, I'm in a brand new neighborhood," and it's going to be evident. Just threw some properties up here that give you some examples. For reference, this is my house. I live on the corner of Betsy Ross and Ridgeview. My house backs up to the property in question. This is just showing you how some of the houses look. Lots of them are brick, some of them are vinyl, big lots, small lots. We have a great variety. This is what's being built in Winning Colors. Nothing wrong with these houses, but these are not the same houses that you see in our neighborhood. There's no consistency there. Now I'd like to switch gears and talk about community needs. At the Planning and Zoning Commission, the developer's attorney argued that the rezoning from R1A to R1C will allow us to meet the needs of the population in Danville. We wanted to know if that was true because it didn't sound accurate to me. So we pulled the listings for all the homes sold in Danville and Bull County in the last 6 months. This data is readily available. It shows the address, number of beds and baths, square footage, and sales price. And from a look at this data, I'll show you some summaries.
And Mr. Mullins, I apologize to interrupt, but when I had looked at your PowerPoint ahead of time, these were kind of the slides that gave me concern whether this data was introduced to the Planning Commission. And when I read the slide, it said, we heard this said, so we went out and did more research. So I wanted to ask you, was this home sale data presented to the Planning Commission?
It wasn't presented by anyone.
Yeah, I didn't.
Neighbors, because at that time, we were just,
Right,
I had
right.
3 minutes to speak our opinion.
So I think my suggestion is when we're going to get into the home sale data, and I obviously know what's coming on your next slides, where you've been kind of sent ahead. I think that's probably that raw data is kind of evidence that's going beyond what was presented to the Planning Commission.
Then can I skip the raw data and maybe
Absolutely.
just talk about a summary? And in this particular example, the summary is if you tabulate that data, the average square footage is 2,400 square foot, average sales price is $282,000, which tells me that people want bigger houses and are not afraid to pay for them. And then I'm going to skip the raw data because you said that that's new evidence. But if you split it right down the middle at $250,000 as your price point, 78 people purchased homes below $250,000 and 79 purchased above $250,000. So there's just as many people looking for above 250 as below. And then we did the same thing. I won't talk about the raw data, but the same thing by square feet. And if you split it at 2,000 square feet, there's just as many people looking for homes above 2,000 square feet and have bought homes in Danville and Bull County as there are that have purchased below 2,000 square feet. So obviously what this tells me is that the need for cheaper and smaller homes really is not evident. It seems like there's just as many people looking for bigger, more expensive homes. What about this? Is this okay to show?
See, I think if that wasn't presented below, that's probably introducing new evidence.
Okay. Well, I won't talk about this, but this was just some average sales price for the homes in Winning Colors. And oops, I'm sorry. That's the same thing. I think that all of this Mr. Sharp has addressed. I don't know if there's anything here for us to discuss, and then for the sake of time, I'm going to jump over this slide. But this is just basically a summary of what we have found that Mr. Sharp has already confirmed as well. Same with this proposal from Sharp is single family, low density, no modular, no manufactured. And yes, I think you've heard all this information already from Mr. Sharp himself. Some concerns about, we are concerned that the properties being developed in Winning Colors are not actually being developed by Mr. Sharp. They were being developed by the Carver Group. So I'm not certain, and we're not certain how he can maintain that the houses will be the value that they are if the lots are sold off to another development group. How will you be able to enforce that? And it should be noted that, it should be noted that we did have, we have 133 properties in Colonial Heights, and before the P&Z meeting, we had petition signatures of 126 of those 133 opposing this zone change. Some of the architectural elements that we've known from Winning Colors, looking at Winning Colors in Colonial Heights, A lot of the homes in Winning Colors that are being developed right now are vinyl siding, little variance in design, very small homes, there are no deed restrictions. But you have quite the opposite in Colonial Heights. And the goal two, they encourage a compact, high-quality development which protects the community character. Colonial Heights is a very walkable neighborhood. It's great for the elderly, it's great for small children, small families and children. It's walkable because there's very low traffic right now. It does dead end at the top of the top of Ridgeview. And we think that adding this proposed road is definitely going to increase the traffic through our neighborhood. It has to. With concern to property values, when we first heard about this proposed zone change, we did reach out to the planning and zoning, and we were told that property values was really a negative thing that we shouldn't discuss because doesn't really enter into the argument for whether a zone change is a viable zone change. But, so we didn't at the P&Z meeting, but obviously everyone that purchased a home in Colonial Heights, as well as everybody in this room that has purchased a home, that home is not just a place for your family, but it's an investment. And I guarantee you, anybody in this room, if you'd have been told when you bought your house, oh, by the way, in 2 years, your property values are gonna drop because we're gonna stick a new development next to you that's not consistent, I don't think that anybody would have made that investment in a home. And that's what we're very concerned about, is that we all purchase homes that are our investments, and we see the potential that our property values are gonna go down. And that's what makes it strange, because we were told not to talk about property values, but if you go back to October 26, 2020, that's something that the city, in fact, did do, and they used property values as a means of propping up Winning Colors. In fact, Mr. Coffey himself, I took this quote from the meeting, he said that we believe the home values proposed will be commensurate to the area, and ultimately, we believe that the infill development would likely raise home values since the development would be complete. So it just seems very odd to us that we were told not to talk about property values, but when it supports the opposing side, it's the very argument that was used for that case. Traffic study, we talked about traffic study a lot. I'm gonna skip through some of these points. One of the things that was mentioned at the time of the P&Z meeting was that performing a traffic study at this time is inefficient. Mr. Sharp just admitted that this is a $25 to $30 million development. It really seems to me, for that type of a development, that a traffic study, this would be the ideal time to do a traffic study to make sure that you can understand how the traffic is going to flow through that neighborhoods and the properties you're going to develop. And then Mr. Hunter also said traffic studies are performed by the developer, and they can say whatever the developer wants, and I agree with that as well. And sometimes they tell us nothing new. Based on these two statements, it seems like that we should have been asking for a traffic study much earlier in the process than when it's being proposed. What's going to happen if we do that traffic study and it shows that you can't get the cars out of that neighborhood? What are you going to do, halt the development and start over? It just seems like that now would be the time that you want that kind of detailed information. And again, I'm not an expert on traffic study, but I can do some quick math. Developer said we're going to go from 89 lots to 119. This is an increase in 30 homes. According to USDOT, average number of automobiles per family is 1.9. Since we can't drive 0.9 cars, let's just say for the sake of argument, every man and woman that owns a house has a car each. I think that's reasonable. And if you have children that are teenagers and own cars, that's just going to be even more. So again, the raw numbers, if you look at going from 89 lots, if I'm just me and my wife, that's 178 cars alone. If you were at 119, that's 238 cars. That's an increase of 60 cars. And if you start talking about adding kids, it goes up to 90 and then 120. But the total number at 119, 476 new cars looking for ways to get out of that property. That's a lot of cars, a lot of new cars, especially if those cars are going through a subdivision that already exists. And again, that's just the number of cars. But if we start comparing that everybody that has a car is going to leave their neighborhood and come back, You can double that, right? Because that's how many new trips through my neighborhood is 952. And again, you could say half of them are going to go down Ridgeview and half of them are going to go down Heartland. That's fair, but still 476 new cars that we have to deal with coming through our neighborhood. That's between 60 and 120 new chances of me getting hit by a car when I back out of my driveway or when I cross the road. And yeah, we can put stop signs in, but still 476 new cars. What if tomorrow you woke up and there were 476 new cars coming through your neighborhood? Wouldn't you be concerned? Anyway, I'm concerned. This is a comprehensive plan, and we talked about this before, but if you're not familiar with the road, this is a little section of road that we're talking about. And what we want to know is, what happened to this road that was going to join the Shakertown Road and this other connector that's going to come into the backside of Betsy Ross? Why aren't those roads going to be built? That might have alleviated some of that traffic. Well, the simple answer is they can't be built because people own both of those two pieces of property. There's no way to add those two roads. There's no stub street off of Shakertown Road. There's no stub street off of Betsy Ross. So there's no way for that traffic to be diverted in those two directions. So what that tells us is that even though we have a comprehensive plan, it seems like that the comprehensive plan can be either upheld or ignored depending on how it suits us. So maybe a cul-de-sac is possible at the top there. And again, the point is 476 cars is a lot of new cars coming through my neighborhood, coming through our neighborhood. Some of the inconsistencies and irregularities that have been brought to all of our attention, first is respect to the general development plan that was submitted by the developer. In the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, what we heard was from the counselor for the developer is that the general development plan that was submitted is more than sufficient and it's in concert with the development plans that this commission has received for decades, Mr. Dexter said. The narrative that's provided in this application more than meets the definition of what's going to transpire on that property. This is what was submitted as a general development plan. Any idea what's going to be built in this property based on this development plan? The only thing I see is I've got a road here. I have no way of knowing anything about that property. I don't understand how, as a general development plan, the city can be satisfied with this as a general development plan. And then what makes it so strange that if you go back to the proceedings from March 9th of 2020, the same counselor, when he was representing the city, said that the commission would be typically used to receiving an actual zone change plat and a concept plan on full-size models that can kind of step into this a little bit easier. So in other words, when he's representing the city, he wanted way more information than he was willing to provide when he was representing the developer. Why this double standard and from the same counselor? And as we mentioned, our example 2, several neighbors reached out to the P&Z office, the city manager, before the P&Z meeting. None of the neighbors reached out to the developer or the attorney. So it just seemed odd to us that when we all started voicing our concerns at the P&Z meeting, the attorney that was representing the developer already had answers for all of our concerns. How would he get the information of all of our concerns ahead of time? Well, what allowed him to have that kind of advanced knowledge of what the citizens were concerned about? But he had an argument already for all those things. Another thing that we pointed out previously, 17 letters went out to residents whose properties directly bordered the property in question. These were mailed out 2 weeks ahead of time. And when we questioned Mr. Hunter, he was quick to point out that his office met the minimum requirements by the law, meaning that the minimum number of residents were notified and in the minimum time required. And while I admit this may meet the minimum requirements of the law, I don't think this meets the intention of the law. It would seem like the intention of the law is for people more than just touching that property, but anybody that's affected by this zone change should be notified. So that just seems kind of odd to us. And last, with the same point, 133 homes in Colonial Heights, we had 126 petition signatures from our neighbors, all clearly indicating that we were not in favor of this zone change and that the needs of the citizens were not considered. And again, we were told not to use property values because it drops it doesn't support our position, yet it's clear that property values can be used when it supports the position of the city. So our conclusion, and I'm sorry if I'm going over, but homes in the newly developed area are not consistent with the homes in Colonial Heights or in Candlewood. They do not meet either goal 1 or 2 as defined in the comprehensive plan, page 7, goals and objectives. According to the data we presented, there's no real need in Danville-Boyle County for this type of development. The residents of Colonial Heights are very concerned about the devaluation of their properties. Clearly, if Winning Colors development is what we have to judge by, and the argument can be made that the Winning Colors development will increase surrounding properties, then the converse has to be true about the Colonial Heights properties. Traffic study must be performed and acted on at this stage, not at the construction phase. And the inconsistencies and irregularities, for somebody that's not an attorney, it seems like to me that this whole process seems to favor the developer and not the citizens of Boyle County. So for these reasons, we, as the neighbors of Colonial Heights, would like to ask the city commissioners to reject this proposal. I thank you for your time and attention. And if you have any questions of me, I'd be glad to answer anything I wasn't clear about. I know I spoke fast.
Any questions for Mr. Mullins?
Well, I just want to clarify again, a traffic study at preliminary plat, that still is prior to construction or even an idea of construction.
Yeah, that may be a
That's well in
misunderstanding on my
advance.
side. I thought I
Okay.
heard from the P&Z meeting that they had said that it would be performed before construction.
Well,
would
before
begin, so-
preliminary
Yeah.
plat, yeah. It
So I
won't
might have
be-
been mistaken about that.
Okay. I guess I do agree, the point you made with, I guess it was comp plan, objective number 5, page 7, about the mass and scaling of buildings is not consistent in the architectural types. So I do agree with that point. So that's something to think about. That's not in line with the comp plan of that item. As far as the need, I guess it wouldn't be popular to stay with this group, but a lot of my constituents have been asking for housing they could afford. Many have bought just what's available. There's a huge need with working couples, young families with kids, single-level homes. The need, at least with the people I'm around, is enormous. Many are commuting or renting in Stanford and in Harrodsburg. I talked to Jeff Jewell a couple months ago, and he said 57 to 67% of the workforce was commuting in. I know several.
You might want to say who Jeff Jewell is.
Oh,
You might want to say who Jeff Jewell is.
yeah, oh, he is the Chamber of Commerce director. So yes, just a lot of people. So it is a need, at least with my demographic and people I know. And the other thing I agreed with, let's see. Oh, I can't find it. So that's all my comments for now.
Could I comment back on
Yeah,
one of those points?
yeah,
So,
both of
yeah,
those.
I understand what you're saying, but I think the developer said that he's going to price property in that area at 200 to 300,000. And if, I couldn't show you that chart about what houses are selling for in Colonial Heights, but over half of those properties sold already in that same price range, and you got a bigger house on a bigger lot. So it's really unclear to me how you're going to build that kind of value into a house that's 1,200 square feet and still hope to sell it for $200,000 to $300,000 when you could go right into Colonial Heights and buy that now. So it just seems very odd to me.
Right, or new materials are very expensive versus
I'd like to-
Physical
older.
entry.
Yeah,
I'd
you
like
know
to-
more about homes.
I'd like to put my Realtor hat on for a moment.
Okay.
And the reason the houses are not selling under 250,000 is because they're not there. They are not in Boyle County.
Houses below 350, you said?
250.
250, okay.
I've been advocating for not only affordable housing for many years, but desirable housing. And there are families that need affordable housing. A lot of those are single-parent homes. And last I kind of looked, there were no homes under 250 in Colonial Heights. Most of those that I have seen have been actually over 400. The minimum of 350, yeah. So, and to Commissioner Holland's point, yeah, a lot of our workforce commutes in from other surrounding counties. And many of my buyers personally have gone into the edge of Lincoln County and bought a home because they can buy a nice home for 12 to 1,400 square feet with anywhere from, 3/10 of an acre for actually under 200. That's what people are looking for. And also, we have two large groups looking for the same product. We have older retired people who are looking to downsize, who are also looking in that same price range. We have millennials that do not want the big house and big yard. I have served on EDP for almost 6 years, and we've had this housing discussion. And what I have said over and over and over is, we talk about millennials, but they're here. They are here, they are in our housing, they are in our workforce. Some of the oldest millennials are almost 30 years old. They do not want the big house and the big yard. They will live in a box in order to be able to travel and have experiences. It's just a different mindset. It just is. They don't want the responsibility. They don't want the expense. They don't want the upkeep. Even if it's 2 bedrooms and 1,200 square feet, they just don't want it. So there is a demand, and the reason that there are not very many home sales under 250 is because inventory is at an all-time low. And they're just not there to buy. I have, as an agent, I have buyers who've been looking for over a year for something affordable.
And I think we have to be careful when we say affordable housing, because that target keeps on moving. I like to describe the people that we're looking for workforce housing, that if I work 40 hours a week and make $15, $20 an hour, what can I afford to buy in any community? And so when I look at workforce housing, I don't look from 200 to 300. I look way down to like 125K to 200K as workforce housing, quote unquote, affordable housing. This really doesn't address any of that, but our community does need what I consider to be workforce housing, and that's where people who work 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, based on their salary, can afford to buy decent housing in our community. That too is missing, like what Commissioner Cherry explained. The other question I had was your numbers about the traffic. You said 120 lots, 89 to 119.
Yeah, 89 to 119 is what we were told in our initial questions to P&Z for the Planning and Zoning meeting. So 30 homes are increase.
And go back, you had a chart that showed 89 homes. Okay, those are the numbers I couldn't write down, okay. And the first column is 178, that's just with mom and dad in the house, right? 2 adults?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
That's all right.
You
It's all
can't
right.
see it, but it says national average, but what this means is one man and
Sure,
wife,
2 people,
2
right.
cars per one household.
Wow.
Well, and we need, with the rate of inflation and material costs, what we think or want a $200,000 house to look like is not necessarily what it actually looks like. The new homes on Winning Colors, in order for a builder to build it and sell it and make a profit,
Yep.
those homes are selling to around 200.
190 is, I think, is what the 3
Yeah,
listings are.
they're anywhere from 190 to 205, I think, is what I've seen. It's a 1,200 square foot house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I believe it's a 2-car garage.
Single car, I think, or single car garage.
Single car. Either way, in today's market, that's a $200,000 house. When Colonial Heights was started 25 years ago, those houses were around 250
Or much less, actually, when I was looking to buy.
or less.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's what you can build or buy for $200,000 now versus 25 years ago. But ultimately, the market determines what people want and what people are going to buy. And right now, the market is determining that Winning Colors, they're selling them as fast as they can build them.
That doesn't really help us with this situation, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't have any other questions for you, so I think we move on to the next phase, if there's another phase of this discussion. I do want to thank you all from Colonial Heights for contacting us, for your presentation, and it's been nothing but a friendly approach to JH, to me. So if there's been some hostile approaches, I don't know anything about those. You've all been very professional and very cordial, and I've enjoyed the conversations that I've encountered with people at your neighborhood. So I do want to thank you for your
Second stage
outreach.
would be sending some people over to break your legs. If you didn't. We were holding off on that a little bit. It's second stage, so. That's the second stage negotiation.
And please know, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just trying to help give a perspective here of, you know, what the market is right now.
I understand. Yep. Okay.
Thank you,
for your
Mr.
time and
Mullins.
attention.
Now, as I indicated, that if this commission wants to go back and ask any other questions of Mr. Sharp that may have arisen, or any further questions of Mr. Mullins, are there any?
I have one. Buffering not required. I understand that statement. I don't necessarily agree with it. Restrictions only can be put on property by developers. I understand that statement. I don't agree with that either. But if this project is to move forward, I think there's some things that need to be considered by the developer if we're going to reach some compromises with the folks who live in the adjacent property. I think they've reached out to us and reached out to planning and zoning, reached out to the developer and asked for some other compromises to be considered. And I'd look forward to you all having those kinds of discussions before we are asked to give a vote up or down for this thing.
And I still have my previous question for Mr. Sharp, if it's okay to ask that now, because it hasn't, we didn't touch upon that.
Mr. Sharp, is that agreeable with you, sir? He has a question for you. Are you amenable to that?
I don't know what the question was.
I was just about to ask.
He has a question for you. Mr. Mullins has a question for you.
No,
No questions?
no.
Okay.
It's our meeting, so Mr. Mullins, I'd like to hear your question stated out loud.
It
So
was a simple one. Mr. Sharp had stated that if this was a zoning change going from R1A to R1C was not approved, and it was a no-go project due to the risks. I was just curious what the risks are.
oh, okay.
I just wanted to know, because I haven't considered that.
Mr. Sharp, I do have a question, because it was a name that was brought up, may not even be germane. But who is the Carver Group?
Carver Group is, he comes from Nicholasville originally and is living here in our community. And his wife is assistant principal, I think, at Bates School. And so he is a member of this community.
Okay.
It's Jeff Carver. And then I would like to rebut a couple of things that have been offered here. First of all, not everyone can afford a 3,000 square foot home. And then, in addition, I recall when Colonial Heights began to develop, that development had homes that were less than 200,000 to 200,000. And then I have another point that I would like to make. What makes you think everyone in Candlewood is going to go through Colonial Heights? Don't you think that the people in Colonial Heights will take the trip back into Candlewood? Have you given consideration to that? You have placed yourself on a pinnacle saying, here we are, here is what we are, and this is how we are. And that is not true. And furthermore, in working with the traffic count, I'm not sure that that was not evidence that was not that should not be entered into the record, is what I'm thinking, because he got into statistics about the number of vehicles there. None of that was presented at the hearing of planning and zoning. That information is inadmissible, and I think that as a counselor, you should have called their hands on it.
It's my understanding that there was quite a bit of discussion at the Planning Commission about
There were no
concerns-
numbers added.
Well, I'm going to ask Mr. Hunter to comment on the content of that meeting, please, sir, as to the traffic count.
Like Mr. Sharp, I refuse to answer. No, I'm just kidding. No. I'm gonna have to think about this a second. We talked a lot about the traffic study, what it is, when it is, what it would be. We didn't talk a lot about, there was a lot of testimony about traffic that would possibly impact the neighborhood. But as far as specific numbers, trip generation, trips per household, how many trips a single-family household generates by way of an engineered study, none of that information was discussed at the Planning Commission. It was more just traffic in general, where it would go, how the roads would connect, pro and con of those connections, and then again about the traffic study, why it wasn't submitted, how the waiver was requested, then granted, and when the study would actually be performed.
With that said, Counselor, would you suggest that the commission disregard that data?
I mean, I think that's up to the prerogative of the commission. This was not evidence in terms of I sat there and conducted a traffic count and I counted 124 vehicles between noon and 2 p.m. That absolutely would be admissible and should be excluded. The proposal going from 90 homes to or 89 to 121 and then arguing the cars that would be increased, I think that was raised enough below. That's not evidence, that's an argument. You all know that adding new homes is going to create new cars driving up and down the road. And I don't think the commission could base a denial of this zone change based on a car count. So I kind of think it's a moot point.
So it's a moot point.
Yeah, it really is.
I think it's worth us, in order to make this as fair a hearing as possible, I think we would be wise to set that aside.
Repeat your last statement, Mr. Mayor.
My last statement was, in order to make this hearing as equitable as possible, my suggestion would be we would be wise to set aside the data, the car counts, et cetera. Logic may be that, but that was not submitted during the hearing, at planning and zoning level.
Right, so the issue about traffic was an alleged irregularity in requiring the traffic study and the timing of when the traffic study would be. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So if you all were to reject the recommendation and override the recommendation of the planning committee, you could do so based on a procedural deficiency. I don't know of any grounds in your zoning ordinance to deny, to overrule the planning commission's recommendation based on the actual numbers in a traffic count.
Sure.
So that's my point, is it's kind of a moot point, because I don't know that that's a sufficient basis. You have to look back to the comp plan, the goals and objectives, and they've not even argued that the numbers should support denying it.
But if I heard correctly, Mr. Morgan, you intend to do something of a traffic study.
There'll be a traffic study done before the preliminary plat construction phase. So we'll, I mean, that will drive their layout, you know, as we do the traffic study to see which direction, you know, traffic's
Okay.
flowing. That will drive the layout. So that's really the next step. I mean, I've already been in discussions with the, once it passed through planning and zoning, I reached out to his engineer and said, hey, we got to start working on this whenever this gets passed, you know, and then go from there. So it's already something we're going to work on. That's the next step if this does pass. I mean, you know, even if it stays R1A, that's going to be a discussion we have. And any kind of development decides to go in there, if is there development proposed for that, if it's R1A, we've got to have the same discussion about traffic study, because it's going to be a big traffic impact either way. So, you know, that's, as engineering concerned, we have to see that data but the layout will be driven by this zone change discussion. And then once we have the layout and we could do the traffic study, then once we get the number of units, and so all that kind of plays in together, but it's something that we'll do before we ever see a layout, before it ever gets to preliminary plat stage, we'll have a traffic study completed.
Counselor, I'm confident that the commission and staff is free to have conversations over the next 2 weeks with respect to these issues.
Yes, just not in a quorum.
Correct, I understand
Or a
that.
series of meetings that would lead to a quorum. Yeah, mindful of the Open Meetings Act.
Right.
If
Thank
there's
you.
additional information that this commission needs, absolutely.
Is this commission allowed to discuss any part of this with either party?
So I think all the citizens have the right to petition their elected officials and make their voices heard. I think this commission needs to be cautious not to, it's hard to exit yourself from a conversation, but the point is, as we talked about tonight, look, let's just stick to the facts that were before the planning commission, and so you'd want to restrict yourself to that. But if there is more data that is needed in terms of, you know, maybe something from Ms. Rader, you didn't get a copy of something before the planning commission, you certainly can reach out to receive that as well, but certainly mindful of the Open Meetings Act. That is correct, Mayor.
Thank you on that. And as I indicated in opening remarks, we are not making a decision tonight. We're here to gather testimony. We're here to look at facts. We're here to hear what others have to say. But as I also indicated earlier, each of you has a right to 3 minutes at the podium on this particular discussion. And I ask that you, if you had something to say that the previous 2 people have said, I ask you to consider everyone's collective time in the room. So the podium is yours to.
You have a list there. You just want to
I
go down
do.
the list?
I'll be glad to. So, Mr. Mullins, you've done your thing. Mr. Sharp, you've done your thing. How about Jacob Webb? Front and center, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
3 minutes, please.
Yes, sir. I want to thank you all for your time this evening very much. I've had the great privilege of walking my neighborhood the past couple days and talking to a lot of neighbors. And 2 facts for sure. One, you know, we are collectively against this zone change. 100%. Everyone I have spoken to is against it. And second fact, we've sent you a lot of emails. So I want to thank all of you very much. I know we've filled your inboxes. We appreciate it. I want to just kind of bring us back to specifically some facts here. The recommendation passed by the P&Z stated this change conforms and is compatible with the surrounding area. It represents only a slight modification to the existing zoning. It's not true. In Chapter 9, page 150 of the Comprehensive Plan, it states, residential development should not exceed the density of immediately adjacent developments by more than 50%. By continually saying this is low-density residential housing for low-density residential housing, that doesn't mean it meets the Comprehensive Plan. It is not compatible. It is not a slight modification. It is not a gradual change. It is not a slight narrowing of lots. It is not compatible. The existing R1A lots of Colonial Heights you just saw are the adjacent properties in this case. Also the Candlewood subdivision, also the adjacent properties in this case. In Colonial Heights, I know we have lot widths of 100 feet in most cases. So with the R1C allowing for 50 feet in width of lots. So once again, this allows, as you've seen already with the diagrams, it does not meet the comprehensive plan when it comes to density, allowing for property where you can put almost 4 pieces of property where the existing one adjacent, it does not meet the comprehensive plan. I know we've all talked quite a bit about home values. I do want to take the time to defend my good neighbor and friend, David Mullins. His presentation was wonderful. It spoke of the Candlewood subdivision just as our subdivision. Our subdivision and our community does not look down upon anyone. I don't know what comment was referred to specifically saying that we did that, but it is absolutely not true. The traffic facts that were brought forth were just as much to consider the safety of the residents of the Candlewood subdivision as well as the folks in Colonial Heights. Mr. Sharp came up here and specifically said right from the beginning that he is David and we're going to try to feed him to some lions. Well, that's just not the case. This is just truthfully the way it is, that this is just the request that he has made is not compatible. It's not comparable to our subdivision or the Candlewood subdivision.
15 seconds, sir.
Yes, sir. He said that he was basically recruited to do a project. That's why he's doing this. So his recommendation in this was to say that I have some land available. Let me butcher it, cut it up, and sell as many properties down it as possible, and that will be the solution to all of our problems. Not true. We ask that you say no to this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Eddie Compton.
Oh, thank you all. A lot of things, to not say what's already been said, I do want to talk a little bit about the makeup of our community, because I felt like it was a little bit under fire at times. And I want you to know our community has school teachers, nurses. I'm talking about, Colonial Heights. We have school teachers, nurses, stay-at-home dads, stay-at-home moms. We have most people, both families, both the mother and father are working in our neighborhood. This is a working-class family neighborhood. I mean, to paint it in any other way, I just don't think that's fair. I'm from Eastern Kentucky. I grew up in a trailer. I went to Center College. I graduated in 2001 on a scholarship. I came back to Danville because of how beautiful this town is, and because we lived in Lexington, because there was opportunities to find. We didn't want to live in a very dense area. We came here because of a neighborhood like Colonial Heights, and that's going to bring people here. It brought me. I never thought I'd be back to Danville. When I graduated from Center in 2001, lots changed. But it's a great community to raise a family. And that's why we came here. And ours is a neighborhood of families. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Mark Harris, floor is yours.
I've kind of been made to feel like tonight that I'm a bad person or I'm a shallow person because I'm against this zone change. And I taught school, my wife and I taught school about as long as Mr. Atkins did. We put in our time, and we've retired, and we worked hard so we could buy the house in Colonial Heights. And my wife and I, she a whole lot more than I, we walked the neighborhood. And to think there's that many more cars and that many more, it's scary. And I know a couple of the commissioners live right on that road that's going to affect them. That's a lot more traffic and a lot more safety. And that is my biggest concern. I'm not against housing. We knew that this was coming. We knew the connector was going to go. We need new housing. Well, there can be 90 more houses. But you go 100, add more 30 to that, and that much more cars, and that much more safety, and that much more danger, that's scary to me. And I'm just speaking on behalf of my family. My kids visit, and I'm just worried about that. And I hope that he didn't say, I'm gonna take my ball and go home if you don't approve this tonight, that you feel like that's a threat. Because we're thinking about the people in this community, and I hope you think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Sue Andrews? Do I have that name correct? Andres. I apologize.
So I probably have a slightly different perspective than a lot of people. I grew up in poverty, and my family was even homeless at one point. And I used to live in Seattle, and I worked with the homeless in Seattle. And so I know that we do need housing, and we need housing for people with lower incomes. When we look at this plan, this is not a plan, so I can't really look at this and say, is this the right plan? Because I don't know what this is. I don't think $200,000 to $300,000 homes is the right plan. That's what I have an issue with. When I look at who the community is that these homes are supposed to be built for, $200,000 to $300,000 homes does not, those homes are too expensive for the community that they're supposed to be built for. Whether or not it's the right place for them is a different argument, but that is the wrong price point if we're talking people who are the working class. And I think you hit the same point, and that's the problem I have. The $200,000 to $300,000 home, that's the home I have in Colonial Heights, and my home's almost 4,000 square foot. The people that if you're going to build a little tiny home, you can build it a lot cheaper than $200,000 to $3,000. And so we do also though need another inlet or outlet out of Colonial Heights. It's a safety issue to only have one way to get in and out of that neighborhood. We have people doing construction, and you can't get through sometimes. And if you needed an ambulance, my mom used to live with me, and I had to call the ambulance multiple times. And there's always times that, the roads could have been blocked and it couldn't have gotten through. So it's a safety issue. But I think there needs more detail before this plan gets approved, quite honestly.
Thank you, ma'am. That concludes those that signed up to speak. We will move on into item 3. This is the...
Mr. Mayor, before you move on, I complimented the Colonial Heights people for their presentation. I feel as a commission, we need to compliment Mr. Sharp on his presentation as well. So, Mr. Sharp, thank you for your attendance and your presentation tonight as well.
Madam Clerk, would you read ordinance number 1990?
This is the first reading of ordinance number 1990, an ordinance changing the zone from R1A single-family residential to R1C single-family residential for approximately 6.025 acres, more or less of real property located at 0 Sanctuary Road in the city of Danville, Kentucky.
Mr. Sharp, anything you want to address on that?
No, sir.
Anyone else?
I have a question, but it's a
Question.
general question. for Mr. Sharp. Approximately how long, if you could tell us this, approximately how many years would it take to build all 120 homes?
Rolling Meadows started in '86. And it had about 125 homes. Presently, there may be 1 or 2 lots that are not built on. So do the math.
But some of the homes in Candlewood were built in the mid-'70s, is that right?
Candlewood was started maybe late 70s, and it just completed this year. This project, based on my experience in the Hunt Farm, will probably take, well, or a better way of stating it, I will probably not see it completed.
When did you start the Hunt Farm?
Started the Hunt Farm, actually acquired it in something like 2000. And it wasn't until something like 2005 before we were able to commence development. And at 2007, at the time that we were in the process of ready to sell lots and homes, the Depression struck. And there was no construction. There were 2-3 homes built in that development from something like '05 to 14. And it's only within the last 2 years that that development has progressed and started to grow. And let me add this number to it. Home price of one of the initial homes built in there sold for $148,000. Today, the last home that sold in there was $300,000. There has been no increase in the size of homes in that development. You have an escalation in price of materials. You have uncertainty associated with the materials. And frankly, I just opened another section in that development. Within a month's time, 6-inch PVC pipe increased in price by $26,000. Now you think, you go back and look at this $200,000 home, that may be possible on Winning Colors. I'm not sure that it may be possible if this project proceeds and goes in there. The economics are crazy. The material, the futures on material, at this time in '21, was $500 1,000 board feet. Today, or Friday, as of the report there, the price for that same 1,000 board feet is $1,300. Now, you will all enjoy the appreciation of your property as a result of that. But the effect that it has on the working force, the workforce people is just daunting. In addition, there is something else coming down the road called inflation. That's part of what I just talked about. You have an increase in the interest rates. Now, granted, many of you in here remember the 18% interest rate. I dealt with it. Now, the interest rates that we have today are nothing compared. And within the next 6 months, there appears to be an increase that will be in the neighborhood of 3.5 to 4.5%. For each point that the interest rate goes up, you have the exclusion of people from the market, which does not speak highly of where we're going. We are in daunting times. And going into this project, I can't begin to tell you what it's going to cost to put a street in. I wish I could.
Let me ask a quick question. Going back 5 years, if you can, what was the average square foot cost of your construction?
Well, it just depends on how you want to finish it out.
Well, I'm talking about the things you built.
You know, square foot pricing is not an accurate measure of the cost of a home. The contents within is the accurate measurement of the value of the home. However, in reference or answer to your question, you were probably looking in the neighborhood of $60, $75 a foot. Perhaps Denise would be better to address that because she's able to go back and look at the statistics in the realtor world.
What would you say what would you say the cost of that would be today?
You know, I referred to Daniel. I'm going to have Daniel's friends help to respond to that because I can't tell you. I have an hour price on a 2x4. If I price a 2x4 and I wait an hour to buy, I may end up having to pay more. I don't have a way of answering that. I can't put a value on the homes that I presently have under construction because of the unknowns.
Would you say it's roughly double?
I'm sorry?
Would you say that it's roughly double what it was 5 years ago? I'm just looking for some kind of reference here.
You could.
Guys, we need to cut this off, don't we?
I'm stuttering because I can't answer that.
Well, I can maybe answer that. And I just was talking to a developer in another city recently. And he broke out some recent home sales and broke them out to price per square foot, which we sort of go by in real estate, but not really, because if it's not a new build, then anyway, it was anywhere from $120 to close to $200 a square foot is what homes are selling for. But again, you have to take into consideration the amenities that those homes may or may not have.
Mr.
However,
Chair?
my response back to him, just doing pure numbers, was, 3 years ago, we were happy if we got $100 a square foot for any home. And now it's kind of a minimum.
Are we on number
We're on
3?
item 3. Yeah, we've had the first reading.
Did she read it?
Yeah, she read it. And we asked if Mr. Sharp had any presentation to that. He responded to the negative.
Thank you much. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone tolerating me.
We've dealt with much worse, sir.
Well, thank you.
Is there anyone that, from the opposition that would like to address anything on item 3? Any questions for anyone else on item 3?
Would you state the location of item number 3 for those in attendance?
0 Sanctuary Road.
Don't tell them anything. Oh, for
Yes,
Goggin.
off of Goggin.
And how many acres? What's the acreage?
We
A
just-
little over 6.
Okay, and we plan to take action on this one tonight?
Well, we just,
Just first reading? Okay. We don't have to approve the first reading? We don't have to approve the first reading? No, not on the zone change.
comes to you with a recommendation of approval from the planning commission. So if you're going to approve it, it has to be an ordinance, so you wait till the second reading.
Okay.
We did discuss it a bit at our last meeting.
Well, we're ready for a motion to adjourn, probably, aren't we, yeah?
That would be in order, since there is no further comment or testimony to be given, and there's nothing further on the agenda. So, a motion to adjourn.
I didn't move that, no. I just wanted to raise the question. I didn't
Motion
move.
to adjourn was by Commissioner Atkins.
Okay.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Holland.
I would just like to know what our path is moving forward before we adjourn.
Good question.
That'd be good for the audience, too, yeah, okay.
So you all have a regular meeting Monday, is that correct?
Next
So
Monday.
you could put this on for a second reading, at that point have a vote, or if you think a little time needs to go by to allow folks to talk to one another, as one of you suggested, that's fine as too. So if you all want to set this for a second reading on Monday, or if you want to let it sit.
I personally
for a
would.
few more weeks.
It would be first reading for both technically, right?
Well, no, it'd be second readings of the ordinance, because we had the first readings tonight.
Would it also be proper to explain what the commissioner's options are and what would happen based on those options?
I will be glad to put that in writing and distribute it to you all.
Can you give a brief overview of that for these folks in attendance?
Sure,
today?
yeah. So you have to, it's really the same standard that the planning commission did. The planning commission's recommendation is important for a couple reasons. One, if this body doesn't take any action, then whatever the recommendation of the planning commission is goes into effect. If this body ties, then the recommendation of the planning commission goes into effect. So you all have three options. The Board of Commissioners can approve this ordinance as it is written, and since that comes from the Planning Commission, you don't really have to make any further specific findings at all. Second, you have the option of identifying something that needs to go back to the Planning Commission for further consideration. You would need to point that to something, either an irregularity in the statutory process for the zone change, or something within your zoning ordinance that you believe the Planning Commission overlooked or misunderstood, or perhaps an additional factual hearing is needed if you want to send that back to them. If you think you've identified something that would require a brand-new factual evidentiary hearing, you have that option, although I kind of think you all ruled that out last time, unless there's something tonight that you've heard. If a majority of this body wants to override the recommendation of the Planning Commission, then you will need to specifically identify factually why this is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, or some other shortcoming that you believe that the applicant has made in its proposal. And that would have to be done at whatever point in time you're making your decision, and it needs to be articulated out specifically.
When do you all want to bring this up again? A regular meeting next Monday?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Would our legal advisor come to the meeting Monday night with some written options, directions? Like if we vote no, you have that written out. If we vote yes, you have it written out.
Sure.
Usually, we paid some pretty good money to have you come over here, so.
I'm
might as well-
happy.
Might as well get some work out of you, right?
I am happy to do so.
yeah, but every time you call him here, it's more.
We vote in affirm, it needs to be stated correctly. If we vote against it, it needs to be stated correctly.
Right, so to vote to affirm it is the ordinance, which you already have. If the majority of this body wants to vote to override the planning commission's recommendation, then we need to work on specifically what that's going to say. And I'm happy to work on trying to write that out and explain that ahead of time, but I will need some direction.
So let me suggest procedurally that we funnel those things to Earl, our city manager. let our city manager communicate with council.
Sure.
Is that good? We have a motion to adjourn in a second. Any further questions, comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Again, I want to thank you all for your time,
Thank you.
for the deliberation. You've made our head
Think
hurt.
about.
Thank you.